Hello, and welcome back, my lovely Lovecraftians, to the fourth tale of the Tale of Borrasca. This story is written by C.K. Walker and dedicated to our Cuthluwu devotee, Kamikazali. When I pulled up to his house the next morning, I can tell Kyle had cracked. His skin had taken on a yellowed color, and his voice was flat and void of emotion. "It's not over yet, Kyle," I said as I dropped into the seat next to me. "Yes, it is, Sam," he all but whispered. "No, I don't believe that. Kimber's dad is missing too, you know. Maybe it was him instead of that. I couldn't bring myself to say it. We're living in hell. Drisking, it's hell. It's our own reality." I couldn't disagree. The town I'd grown to love seemed so foreign to me. Whitney hadn't been an outlier like I thought. Missing people were the norm here, and that would make Jimmy Prescott the king. He's Satan himself. As soon as the words were out of my mouth, Kyle punched the car door, awaking from its dead state with rageful vigor. "I'll fucking kill Jimmy Prescott. Where is that motherfucker? You know he's involved in all this, Sam, you know." "Maybe. Partially," I said, staring out the window. "His dad created the town that bred this shit. I'm sure the Prescotts are just running drugs. You know, the powder." "Yeah, and so what? He's recruiting people to be drug mules or something?" "Maybe." I agreed for Kyle's sake, though I didn't really believe it. The sound, the great beast machine in Borrasca gave off the distinct stench of death. And though I knew that physically that was impossible, I didn't change my mind about it. The air smelled different after the metallic wailing ended. We drove over to 4th Street, Gourmet Coffee and Bakery, and went in to buy our usual provisions of rock stars and monsters. As I paid for the 4 packs of cans, I saw Mira waiting on coffee at the end of the bar. I could tell immediately that there was a good mood about her. Something I haven't seen much of since I started working for her. It was probably a good time to tell her I was calling out of work for my 5th day in a row. "Hi, Mira," I muttered when I approached. I can't come in today. I've got something really important." "Sam, oh my gosh, how are you?" Okay," I stuttered. Good, she said brightly. "Don't worry about coming in. I'll hold down the fort. I'm sure I can call Emmanuel if I need some help. But really, Sam, what have you been up to lately that's so important?" My mind blinked. Just as I started to stutter out some bullshit about helping my dad, Kyle appeared behind me. "We're trying to find Borrasca," he said with all the gravitas of a eulogy. "Ah, yes, Owen told me you'd ask him about that. You know, that's just a story, Sam. The legend has been around since I was a kid. Yeah, well, we're looking for our missing friend Kimber. We think maybe she's there," I trailed off lamely. "Oh, really? I thought I heard that the Astros were staying with relatives in Maine over the summer." "Oh, well. Anyways, good luck, boys." "Thanks." Kyle's voice was sour, and I knew his patience was thin. When we got back to the car, we popped open a can of Rockstar and started chugging. I knew better than to ask Kyle if he wanted to smoke, since I was sure he hadn't lit a bowl since before Kimber disappeared. He finished the energy drink in under a minute and crumpled the can in his hand. "I don't like your boss," he said. "Mira? Why not?" "I don't know. She's just off." "Well, I mean, she's been going through some things." I wasn't going to elaborate any further. "Why were you asking her husband about Borrasca anyways?" "I don't know. I was just making small talk and I thought he might know. He seemed to know about, like, a lot of things." "And did he know?" "Nah." I took a long gulp of the sour drink and choked on. I remember something he said. Well, actually, yeah, he said a Borrasca instead of just Borrasca. You know, like it's a thing instead of a place. Kyle lowered his rock star. "And it is?" "It is what?" It's a thing." "I don't know. I've never heard of it. I've Googled everything weird about this town, but nothing ever came up." "Did you spell it right?" "I don't know," I shrugged. "Do you know how to spell it?" "Well, No. I pulled out my phone. No. Fuck Google, Kyle said. We need to talk to Catherine Scallon. That's what Kimber would say. He was right. Catherine Scallon might be the most knowledgeable person in town, and was probably the right person to ask. I pulled out a 4th Street coffee and prayed. She was in her office already. When we parked in the front of Driskin Arts and Antiques, I was disappointed to see the store was dark. Kyle pointed to a small, cheap, open sign hanging in the corner of the door, and I crossed my fingers that it was Catherine's office. I was relieved to find the door unlocked, and we hurried past all the antiques and blown glass to the back of the store, where we found an open door, and Catherine sitting at her desk. Boys, she shut up when she saw us. You're up quite early for summer break. How did the essay go? Great, I said. Actually, we're here for more help. Personal interest, Kyle added. Catherine raised her eyebrow. Calling me impressed. I needed to get right down to it. If by some small chance Kimber was still alive, then every second counted. We're here because we want to know if Borrasca is a thing or a place. Catherine raised her eyebrow. Well, I remember that luncheon as a kid. I'd actually have to tell you, I didn't know if it wasn't for Wyatt. He knew so little about so much. As sort of jack of all trades. Anyways, he told me an interesting fact about Borrasca. It's both. What do you mean? I leaned over her desk. Well, the term Borrasca is just an old, outdated lexicon. The word was used by mines to describe an underperforming mine. A mine? I whispered. Kyle shook his head. We've been looking at mines. So, all the mines in Butler Country are Borrascas, I asked. Well, generally it's only the first mine in the system to run dry that's called a Borrasca. You know which mine ran dry first in our mining system? Kyle asked, from where he stood near the door, repeatedly clenching and unclenching his fist. Not off the top of my head, no, she laughed. I can look, though. I think I have those records here somewhere. Catherine walked behind her desk and opened a drawer of loose files. This is an odd thing to be interested in for boys your age, but I guess I should be glad you two are so eager to learn, especially over the summer. Yes, ma'am. Very eager, said Kyle. Is the Borrasca the first mine that ran out of ore? Is that by chance the same one those kids disappeared in? The McCaskies? Oh, no, I don't think so. That particular mine was Southwest Mine and was very close to town. I think it was one of the last to close, actually. Here we go. This package should just have that information for you. Catherine spent far too long moving books around on the desk to make room for the stack of papers she had. Kyle and I paced around the room nervously, trying to appear casually interested, while the energy drink started coursing through our systems. Here we go. The first mine to close was the North Central Mine, which was, actually one of the first to open. But where is it? Kyle walked over to the desk and braced his arm out. Where's the mine? Catherine pulled over a different stack of papers and started to fumble through it. After the longest minute of my life, she made a aha sound and pulled out a large yellow piece of paper that had been folded into a standard A4 size. She unfolded it on the desk and leaned over to read the markings. I could see from where I was standing near the doorway that it was a map, and I knew we weren't leaving this office without it. Let me see. The mine was further up the mountain, a little harder to see, and she pointed to a small dot on the map that was at least 4 miles from where we've been looking. Can we take this? Kyle asked. We'll bring it back. Of course. I'm sure I have copies. Listen, if you boys are going exploring, I'm bringing my dad, I lied. Oh, excellent. Then you guys have fun, she yelled as we rushed out the building. We didn't stop to answer her. Fun was far from our minds. It's so far from where we've been looking, Kyle stuttered. We need to get there now. We need to get a gun. A gun? Where are we going to get a gun, Kyle? From your dad. He's not going to give us a gun, man. Fine, then let's scout the place first and then we'll come back with a gun. That didn't seem like a good idea to me either, but what choice did we have? After studying the map for several minutes, we realized the easiest way to access the mine was still through the West Rim Prescott Ore Trail. We parked at the trailhead and made the familiar hike down the marked trail and then up the beaten path, realizing that we have to travel past Ambercott Fort on the way. I knew in my heart that we were going the right way. We were walking the same path that so many people before us had on their way to Borrasca. But what had they found there? We passed the treehouse, which was silent as the morning. We walked in the woods further north than we had ever been before. And soon we were flying blind, hiking in the general direction of the dot on the map, and hoping we were still on course. Within an hour, I began regretting that we'd come without provisions, emotional and unprepared. By noon, we had been hiking for 4 hours, and it seemed to me that we were lost. I tempered the welling panic with thoughts of Kimber and Whitney and the answers to the mystery that had absorbed my life for so many years. Kyle, for his part, said nothing and kept his eyes straight, and his mission his priority. And then, just as the sun teetered on the apex of the day, we saw an emptiness through the trees and the hard lines of man-made buildings. Kyle quickened his step, and I rushed to keep up. When we finally broke through the tree line, I choked on my own deep breath and fell back against a tree. I looked over the quiet encampment. A large wooden sign posted that was almost as long as the entire clearing was still standing near the entrance of the mine. It had to be a century old, and though most of the letters had rotten over the years, from those remaining I could guess that it once had said, Driskin's Underground Mine. What was left, however, said skinned men. Skinned men. That way, Kyle pointed over the north end of the camp. We stepped out from the shadow and into the vulnerability of the clearing. There were several large buildings still standing, and the boarded up entrance to the ore mine was set back into the mountain. We're not getting in there, I whispered. Let's try that building, he said, and pointed towards one nearby, which was the largest and at least 2 stories tall. We counted to 3 and then ran across the camp to the large wooden doors of the old building. They were cracked open, and we squeezed inside. I was sure I had no doubts that death was indeed present in Borrasca. We were standing in what I guessed was a refinery, and in the middle of the room was a large silver, conically shaped machine. A conveyor belt fed into it, and the room had a sour smell. Even the dirt beneath our feet seemed to have taken on a crimson tint. This is a machine. This is where they take them. I said, this is a place where people die. Kimber isn't here. Come on. I was only too happy to squeeze back out the door of the building and tiptoed around the side. We rounded a corner and almost ran into a recently waxed shiny green truck parked there. This is Jimmy Prescott's truck, I breathed. I know whose truck it is, Kyle growled. We were now on extraordinary high alert. Kyle dropped to the ground and began to commando crawl around the building. I followed him, waiting to hear a shout or a gunshot, but none came. As we crawled around to the back of the building, Kyle turned around to me and put his finger over his lips, and then pointed at a 1-story brown building that was only a dozen feet away from us. He got into a crouched position and moved as fast as he could across the gap between the 2 buildings. I did the same. As soon as I reached the wall next to him, Kyle whirled around and put another finger on his lip, then pointed to a window directly above us. There were noises coming from inside, and even to me, a 16-year-old virgin, the sounds of sex were unmistakable. We could hear an animalistic grunting and the tired, objecting groans of an old mattress. Unable to help myself, I whispered, "What the fuck?" to Kyle, but he's already gone, all caution abandoned, running alongside the side of the building. I followed him in through the first door. We came upon and was hit in the face by an invisible wall of filth and suffering. A smell knocked me back, but Kyle kept running. I followed him in, past crates of ramen noodles, MREs, bottled water, and boxes I had no time to read. I crossed another threshold, and I was suddenly surrounded by people. So many people I skidded to a halt and realized I was standing in a sort of dorm, rows and rows of bed on either side of me. The people strapped to them, some of them wearing dirty rags and some of them wearing nothing at all. Many seemed to be bloated, and I waited for one to call out to me, but they were all remaining silent. Some watching me through tired, dead eyes, and others turning away. Looking around, I realized they were all women. In the building I saw seemed to be pregnancies. Some were confined to the bed, and others were not. I looked around the room for Kyle, and saw him standing a little further in the room, looking back at me with the same confused, wild expression I was sure was on my face. I saw the realization cross his mind, and called out to him, but he was already running again. I lost him before I had taken 5 steps to follow. I figured it was probably best to just keep running, spread out and look for Kimber. I didn't see her in this room, and I was sure she would have called out to us if she was. I looked around for another door and saw one cracked open on the left behind a row of beds. I stared straight at it as I made my way there, desperate to avoid the wretched void eyes of the woman around me. First we helped Kimber, then we helped the others. I will come back and help you all, I promise, as soon as I find Kimber. Without a thought, I pushed the door wide open. As soon as I reached it and found the source of the noise, we heard outside. It was Jimmy, something I'd been expecting to see, but the scene before me was not. He was hunched over the bed of an almost unrecognizable, unresponsive Christy, treating her like an animal. She watched me through the slits of her dead eyes, but she didn't call for help. I thought I saw a tear run down her cheek before she turned her face away from me to face the wall on the other side. What the fuck? I didn't even realize the words were audible. I'd never seen this depth of human suffering. Jimmy's head snapped around to look at me briefly, and rendered surprise before he smiled in a way that turned my eyes to ice. He didn't stop what he was doing. I wanted nothing more to run over and push him off Christy. But my utter shame, I couldn't force myself to come any further into the room. Sam! Sam! Kyle's voice echoed through the building and immediately cured me of my paralysis. I found myself running back to the miner's dorm and away from Jimmy Prescott and Christy. Kyle, back here, hurry, please. I found Kimber. I followed his voice through the maze of beds, and the room of Kaneki of voices began to follow me. Help us, please. There were maybe a handful of girls yelling at me, but it sounded thunderously loud as it filtered through my guilt. The weight of their misery dropped down upon me, and it almost pushed me to the ground. I'll get help. I'll help you, I promised. Then as I followed Kyle's voice, still screaming desperately from the adjacent room, I sprinted across another threshold and saw him, hunched down near a corner bed, helplessly yanking on a leather strap attached to it. I slammed into the bed and fell on my knees, trying to work out what he was doing, how I could help him. I tried not to look at the bed. I knew I couldn't see her like that. I couldn't bear it. If Kimber looked at me through those same accusing empty eyes as Christy, and the others had, I might lay down on the ground beneath her and curl up into a ball. Go around the other side. Unbuckle the other 2 straps. Kyle had the high-pitched voice and wild, desperate eyes of madness. I ran around the other side and did as he said, shaking awkward hands. Boys, Jimmy's voice rang out from somewhere in the building. I had just freed Kimber's ankle and was working on her wrist. She whimpered when she heard him and buried her face in my shoulder. Do you think you're hiding? I know where to find you. I knew right where I put that girl. I'll fucking kill you, Prescott, you sick cunt! I'll fucking stomp all your bones and bleed you out, you little motherfucker! Kyle had lost all reason and strategy. He was filled with rage instead of fear, and it scared me even more. I pulled Kimber's wrist from the final strap and yelled, go now. We pulled Kimber off the bed and quietly realized that her legs could barely support her. She was heavily sedated and breathing weakly. We braced her on either side and moved as quickly as we could to the nearest doorway, away from Jimmy. We were in another dorm, though this one was filled with mostly empty beds. I could see sunlight shining through the door as he entered the long room, and we raced towards it. Kimber made little cries of pain. I don't think my heart could break anymore, but I was wrong, because in the next moment it did. I almost dropped Kimber when I saw her staring at me. Her eyes were hollow and uninvested, and when I turned towards her, she looked away immediately, as she couldn't stand the sight of me. Whitney, I said weakly. Sam, let's fucking go, Kyle screamed. I can't. I tore towards him as tears ran down my hot cheeks, and Kyle saw her too. I can't stay, Kyle said, still moving towards the door. I have to get Kimber away from here, please. But he knew I wasn't going anywhere now. Good luck, bro, I said. They both were running in different directions. Winnie's hair was long, but it was thin, as was her face. Everything on her looked brittle except for her stomach, which bubbled out for her like an overgrown balloon. She refused to look at me and flinched at my touch as I desperately tried to unbuckle her from the bed. I hadn't even finished the first belt when I heard Jimmy walk up behind me. I didn't bother to look at him or stop trying to free my sister. I didn't know what else to do. I admire your grit, kid, Jimmy said, and sat down on the bed behind me and continued to watch me, giving no objection to what I'm doing. You probably think that your friends got away, but there's no sense of false hope, is there? There's no sense of any of this, my voice sounded frail, and cracked over the last word. You're wrong about that, Jimmy sighed. But, just so you know, I got Clary out there looking for them already. People making a lot of noise coming down off this mountain. Trust me on that. Sheriff Cleary? I was desperate to keep him talking. Anything to keep him from trying to stop me. Oh yeah, you know, he was supposed to retire from the business, but unlike the previous sheriff, he kept a few horses in the race. Horses? Nothing made sense. Yep. Jimmy slapped the bed next to him. We call this building the stables. He laughed and laughed and laughed, and my blood boiled, and I was sickened by each picture of his voice inked into my mind like a permanent staining book. I dropped the last buckle on the floor and looked down at Whitney. I expected her to spring up and run towards the door while I went up to Prescott, but all she did was rub her wrist, itch her collarbone, and then she put her arms back where they'd been, turned her head away from me, and shut her eyes. I slumped down onto the bed next to her and picked up her cold hand. If she wasn't leaving here, neither was I. It was over. I sent a silent prayer up to God. I didn't know, and wished my friend's safety. Do you know what this is, Sam? I shrugged. It didn't seem to matter now. It's all about the babies. I stared down at Whitney and her swollen belly, but gave no indication I was listening. You wouldn't believe how much money is in this industry. I mean, my dad was a smart man, and he knew we didn't have anything of value to sell. Back then, the Prescotts were dirt poor, out-of-work miners just like everybody else in town. He first got the idea when he sold my other brother off to pay for the legal fees to buy the city. I mean, some people will pay 5 figures for a newborn. You know, even back then. And the organization that buy them, well, they buy in bulk. But we still make a killing off them. And our overhead is very low. Jimmy stood up and pulled a gun out of his waistband and threw it on a bed across the aisle. You know, try to understand, Sammy. It's not about the money. We use these stables for community service, too. Lots of people come in town, to us. Ever since the 50s. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to be here. Listening to this, I didn't want to see Whitney so broken. I didn't want to wait for inevitable death. It was torture in its purest form. What are you waiting for? Why don't you kill me? This isn't a James Bond movie. I don't care about any of that shit. Jimmy laughed loudly, as if it was the funniest thing he ever heard. Kill you? Christ, kid. If I could, then I already would have. But I'm not allowed to kill you. I've been trying to decide if I want to fuck your sister right in front of you, though. She's not one of mine, but it might be worth it just to see your face. Just fucking kill me and get it over with. Just let her go. I'll kill myself if you let her go. Just fuck. I stood up from my bed, and Jimmy took 2 steps towards me and punched me so hard in the face I fell back down. I moaned as I fought the tears and stars behind my eyes. I can't let her go, you little fuck. She's got one of our community service babies in her. Grace says she's got another week to go, 2 tops. Jimmy looked down at Whitney and frowned. She's been putting out shit babies, though. And as soon as this one's out of her, she's got a date with a shiny gentleman. What the fuck does that mean? I yelled at him, the loud ringing suddenly filling the room. Jimmy held up a finger and pulled out a phone out of his pocket. I gotta take care of business. 2 minutes and we can get back to our conversation. Jimmy walked over to the corner of the room and I desperately started to pull on Whitney. We gotta go, Whip. We can't stay here. She kept her eyes shut and her body lax. Whitney, they're going to kill you. My head whipped towards the door as I heard a truck skid in the dirt. Just outside of it, Jimmy ended his phone call, and Kale and Clary walked in, pushing a limping body, Kyle in front of him. Lose something, Prescott? Where's the girl? Couldn't find her. God damn it, Clary, you fucked us. Go back out there and find that girl. Jimmy snatched his gun off the bed and shoved it to the back of his waistband. Now listen here, you little shit, Clary growled. I ain't your fucking employee, and I don't have a fucking day to play hide and seek in the woods. I'm telling you, she wasn't with them. I guess if you want to know where she is, you should go out and get her yourself. Clary threw Kyle down on the floor and spit near his feet. I gotta do your fucking job now. Jimmy walked over and without any hesitation looked me in the eyes and kicked Kyle so hard in the ribs I heard some of them snap inside his chest. I tried to stand up, but I was still dizzy and fighting off the darkness. Where's your little girlfriend, Landy? Prescott raised his boot and then stomped down hard on Kyle's ankle. He screamed in pain. I can do this all day, kid. Larry sat down on the bed across the aisle, lit a cigarette, and watched impassively. Jimmy pulled Kyle to his feet and then punched him hard in the face. A few of Kyle's teeth scattered across the floor. Tell me, you little cunt. Jimmy punched him again in the face and Kyle went limp. You're killing him! I screamed and jumped off the bed, running blindly towards Jimmy in a red rage. Clary stood up and caught me with no effort at all. Holding my arms down at my side, he laughed, cigarette still tucked into the corner of his mouth as I struggled helplessly against his chest. Jimmy had straddled Kyle by now and was rapidly punching him in the face and chest. Kyle was barely conscious, and I prayed that he passed out from the pain. After a full minute of this, Jimmy stood up, rubbed his bloodied fist. Last chance, Landy boy. Fuck you, Kyle said through a wheezing, rattled breath of air. Jimmy spit on him and raised his foot up high as he could, then brought it down on Kyle's face with so much force that I heard his skull break. I sagged in Killian Clary's arms, and he dropped me in a puddle at his feet. Jimmy bummed a cigarette off Clary, and they stood next to Whitney's bed, watching me cry. Jesus, what a mess. After a few minutes, Clary flicked the cigarette out, pulled out his phone. All right, Sam, take your friend. I couldn't have heard him right. Fuck that. That little Landy shit ain't leaving here. You want to clean this mess up, Prescott? I stood up and my knees didn't buckle beneath me. I'm not leaving without my sister. I told him, and Jimmy laughed. Yes, you are, Clary said. You want to save your friend's life. Well, you know, before the lights go out. But it will be soon. He tossed his keys at me. The road off the mountains is backed by the refinery. I let the keys bounce off me, fall to the floor. Clary swore at me. I knew he was right. I was a coward, and I would leave my sister and all the others here just so I can get away and save Kyle's life. I picked up the keys, and then without looking at the two men, I picked Kyle up by his shoulders, and his head rolled back, as if it was no longer attached to his spine. His face was a collage of pulp and blood. I struggled to stay calm and breathe as I dragged him out of the building. Larry and Prescott watched me, taking drags of their cigarettes and saying nothing. I knew they were probably lying to me. Kyle would be dead by the time I got down the mountain, if he wasn't already. I opened the door to Clary's old Ford and placed Kyle in the front seat, wincing as his head rolled around like a ball on a string. It took me almost an hour to get down the mountain, even though I took the overgrown road at ridiculous speeds and did everything I could to destroy the shocks on the truck. I sped into the hospital's emergency zone and found the medical team waiting inside the door. It was clear that they'd gotten a call to expect me because they already had a crash cart with them and an IV ready to push into Kyle's wrist. I left Claire's truck where it was and spent the next 2 hours in the waiting room, calling my dad over and over again, crying over an architectural disgust magazine. No one came to take a statement from me or ask any questions. Kyle's mom, or just before my dad did, started screaming as she saw me. My dad walked in behind her and had a deputy restrain her. He drove me home in silence, but I couldn't take it for long. Is anyone gonna file a police report? Does anyone even fucking care what happened? Sam. He didn't turn to look at me. I'm doing my best to do damage control in the situation, but if Kyle dies or his parents sue, there's nothing I can do to keep you out of court. You think I did this? I screamed at him. We're not going to tell your mother, alright? She has enough to worry about. Dad, it's Kimber. It was the fucking Prescotts and Sheriff Clary. Yes. You arrived at the hospital in Killian's truck. We already talked to them both. I was so frustrated and full of rage that my next words came out jumbled, stuttering, and ended in a helpless scream. We pulled into the driveway, and my dad turned off the car and finally turned to look at me as I struggled to catch my breath. Samuel, we will never speak of this again. Do you understand? Are you fucking kidding me, Dad? Kyle might fucking die. I saw Kimber. Enough. If you want this to go away, you'll keep your mouth shut about it. Make no statements to anyone, and I'll hire the best lawyer I can afford to clean up your mess. I don't know why. You beat your best friend almost to death, and frankly, I don't want to. You. Fuck you! I screamed at him, threw open the door to the cruiser. I ran away from him and the house and my broken life. He didn't come after me. Not that day or another. Since everyone in town thought I was a violent thug, no one would let me stay with them when I called around. I eventually went to a motel far outside of town and drained the last of my savings from work paying for the room. I went back to pick up my car from the trailhead, but it was gone, and I hoped it was Kimber who had it and not a tow yard. I read the papers every morning for some mention of Kyle's condition. I saw the Daily's birth announcement about 10 days later. It just had a son named William. The whirling, twirling, shining gentleman lit up the valley with its stench and song of death at night. It was the last time I ever heard it. I stayed in Driskin long after the money had run out, and I was sleeping on the concrete behind the motel. I stayed until Kyle was released from the hospital, a mute, empty-souled, soulless vegetable. I went to see him once while only Parker was home, and threatened him until he let me inside the home. When I had assured myself that Kyle I knew was dead, and only his empty husk remained, I left the house and hitchhiked out of town. And after I spent 4 drunken, drug-fueled years in Chicago, I came home one day to find a letter waiting for me. It didn't have a return address, but it was postmarked California. I knew it was from her before I even picked it up. She'd written so many of my assignments for me to know. I knew it was Kimber's handwriting, better than my own. Inside it was a letter. The letter, I read it only once, many years ago, until I sat down to transcribe it today. My Kimber, I know you aren't going to understand why we did the things we did. It was all born out of love. Well, at least it started that way. You were everything to me, and you'll always be my daughter. Do you understand? And I'm leaving the world because of what I've done to you, not because of what you are. I don't want you to be upset about what you are, because who you are is beautiful. My dearest, this town has done horrible things, and all of us who live here are guilty. Read this letter and leave this place, honey. I need to tell you all of this. I need to start from the very beginning. Somewhere along the line, decades ago, the major population of Driskin became, unfortunately, unable to bear children. Most people blame the town for letting the iron ore leak into our water tables during the collapsing of our mines. This is the same water table that still provides the town's water to this very day. They were never quite able to fix it, and ore is toxic, and exposure causes infertility. The town did, and still does, suffer greatly from its effects. And the Prescotts, well, bless their hearts, they solved the problems that no one could solve. But it was ugly, crass solution that most people were happy to look away with. they were able to raise families again. You see, they took girls, well, mostly women, from other places, and they impregnated them and gave us their babies. And the town came under the care of Thomas Prescott when he started to sell some of those babies, just on the side for a profit to rich couples. And the sheriff, he helped them do this. But then an ugly rumor started that they were selling to human traffickers, and the Prescotts had to offer triple the price for girls. And in town, we began to murmur, but we once again turned the other cheek when the city was suddenly flooded with money because of how well the traffickers paid. People had well-paying jobs again, and were proud to call Driskin home. So we said nothing, and those that did were taken to the mountains. Because that's where they do it, honey. There's a place on the mountain where the women are taken, Kimber, drifters, runaways. If their parents choose it, sometimes the girls in town are even sold back. They arrange to sell the girls, and they meet them at the tree halfway between our town and their baby mill. Sometimes kids play there now. I think, honey, even you played there. The Prescotts and the sheriff are the ones who impregnate the girls, and the children are named after them. P for children for the Prescotts, and K for the children of the sheriff. And then when the women become too sick or too old to deliver profitable babies, they are sent through a giant machine that was used to refine ore, and their bodies are crushed, and the blood and skin stripped away, and what remains of them are their stolen children and the dust of their bones. And that's all that's left of their bodies, is the powder that they spread over the mountains to hide our crime. I'm telling you this, Kimber, my darling baby girl, because you, honey, you are one of those children. Most of your friends are one of those children. Please get out of Driskin before your father finds this letter. Run away and never come back and never speak of this to anyone. Their industry has deep roots now, and the trackers have lofty connections. Don't tell anyone. Don't keep this letter. Don't look back. I love you. I'm sorry I have to leave you. We all have to answer for our sins, and I'm ready to burn in hell for mine. Love always and forever. Ma. Wow. That's a lot to take in. This story definitely is more of a realistic horror. It's labeled under creepypasta, but this feels almost like true crime. And it just dawned on me why Kimber's mom didn't like Kyle. Both of their names start with a K. They both are siblings. They're half siblings. Their dad is the sheriff. And this has been going on since the 1950s. Because even Christy was like an older one. And my theory is that Whitney was sold when the family moved into town. Because she was just disobeying, and she just missed her boyfriend from the old place, and she was very, to herself, that the dad took the job and sold the kid and is keeping quiet. Because they pay triple price now. My theory is why the Prescotts couldn't kill him is because of a deal that they made, maybe for the safety too. Because it seems like even though the Prescott and the sheriff are obviously the villains and bad, they still abide by their own set of rules. So I'm wondering what rules played in place to keep our protagonist alive. Because this is a lot to take in. The note was very eloquently written. It really does just solidify everything that's happened. And for those of you who may not have picked up on it, Whitney is dead now. The protagonist knows Whitney is dead. The Prescotts literally said Whitney was sick and not giving good babies, and that this would be the last one. He had 10 days to save her, and the dad would not stay up. Would not stay up, would not listen, would not do anything to save his own daughter. If that is his daughter. I guess everything will make sense in the final chapter of Borrasca Part 5. But until then, I hope that we can put all these puzzle pieces together and see the full picture, because this chapter was shocking. The note was probably my favorite part. I love little notes inside of books. It's another perspective outside of the protagonist's eyes. It puts into view how, at first, it wasn't too bad because they were just runaways and drifters. They were people that weren't in town. But then the community became involved too. This is a giant crime syndicate. And whatever happened to Kyle in that hospital wasn't legal. He could have possibly been lobotomized, or he could be underneath medication. They're going to make sure he never talks again. And the fact that Kimber got away is just astounding to me. Especially because they're so busy with their stables that they didn't even think to stop. These antagonists are vile in its purest form. I'm left speechless, and I feel like that's what this chapter was supposed to do. It was supposed to stun. The first few chapters were build up. This book was to stun, to shock, to create the false illusion of pretense of childhood wonder completely shattered. This is real. And with realism comes real consequences. In book 5, we'll finally realize what happens to survivors of Borrasca with Kimber's story. And if our protagonist can get the courage to stop what they know is still going on to this day. Until next time, my lovely Lovecraftians, bye-bye.